I think in these 2 days, one of the things that we've discussed a lot and we've learned a lot about is the commonalities and the possibilities across the Himalaya. Right? One of the points we've been talking about community, and one of our greatest commonality, and an area in which also there's the greatest of possibilities, is in this diversity of arts, culture, literature that we see in our cultures, right, across the region. And the stories that we tell transcend our borders. So, for instance, I think last year, the Bhutanese film Lunana, A Yak in the Classroom, was nominated for the Best International Feature in 2022. And all of us celebrated over here. And Raman published a Gorkhaland novel last year as well, Churan Kamibo's translation called Song of the Soil. It was shortlisted for the JCB Prize, which is the richest literary prize in India. Or when we do citywide exhibits, photo exhibitions like the Kathmandu Triennale and Photo KTM, or music festivals such as Echo is in the Valley, we take our arts and cultures to the streets of the city, to the very people whose stories we tell. But these are also discrete events, right, that do not really cross our borders. While these things are very, very unique to us, they're also very, very situated or located in our particular countries. And I think that is the key challenge. How do we ensure Himalayan arts and culture or writing, while retaining our authenticity and indigeneity, also address the great challenges of our time and transcend our borders? How do we leverage our diversity without being labeled as exotic? And how do we inspire a new generation to continue practicing the arts while being aware of the issues that surround the Himalaya? I think that is one of the key points that I want to discuss in this session, that I want to think about the ways in which we can think about arts beyond our borders. And to do that, we have an impressive panel over here. You can see the bios already. I don't need to tell you that. So please join me in welcoming them. I will go immediately. Nayantara, I want to start with you. Photo KTM, the last edition, is all about birds, our relationship with the natural world. You are currently running an exhibit called The Sovereign Forest, which emphasizes, again, the connection with the natural world. So how do you see this space of visual arts evolve in the Himalaya and Photo KTM's role within it?
Thank you, and thanks for having this panel here. Often, the arts and culture is perceived as a nice thing to talk about. It's associated to aesthetics, sometimes even sort of included decoratively. But for those of us who work in the field, we understand that culture is really the glue that binds us, no? And so when we're thinking about these incredibly complex problems that we are now faced with, that are all sort of evolving as we move forward, what kind of an imagination do we need to cultivate for ourselves and collectively to be able to come up with new solutions as things move forward? And we work in the arts, we work in culture, we work in education. I think a lot of these spaces are quite fluid and sort of speak to each other. I know that everybody's work here on the panel does that. And so I suppose that's how we see, and I speak for ourselves at Photo Circle and Photo Kathmandu, to be part of this conversation. No? So we run this festival, as Amish mentioned, every 2 years. And it's a gathering of storytellers similar to this. And we come together to really talk to each other across borders, across boundaries, about what kind of stories we are telling. Because if we agree that we understand the world around us through the stories and the narratives that we receive on the receiving end, if we are a community of storytellers, what are the stories that we are choosing to tell? And so this past edition of the festival, we were dedicating to that. There were a couple of things we were focusing on, and because we don't have a whole lot of time, I'll just jump straight into it. There's a small curation of works that were featured in the past edition of Photo Kathmandu that we have shared here. So if you have time later today, perhaps you've had a chance in the last day or two. But through these works, what we were trying to invite people to do was pay attention. And in this world that we live in with so much competing sort of, corporate media, sort of, social media at our fingertips bombarding us, what are the stories and the narratives that we are choosing to pay attention to? What kind of time do these stories and narratives encompass, There are ideas of deep time, because as we're talking about change, of course we're thinking about time. How long does it take for a tree to grow? How long has it taken for this rock to form? And so as we are talking about change and impact, how are we thinking about time, deep time, quick time, And I know there's been a lot of conversations around this in literature as well. We've also been thinking about scale, and this year in particular, we were really trying to focus on the very small stories. So there you will see like stories about fireflies, stories about trees, birds, etc. So, but often, when we talk about the climate crisis, the narratives presented to us are extremely large, vast, cataclysmic sort of narratives of doom and gloom, that perhaps we reach very quickly a point where we just switch off. This is too big of a problem for me to try to figure out in my little brain today, and so put it aside, How do we get people's attention as we think about and understand some of these challenges? So these were some of the attempts we were making. Language was another thing we were looking at. Often a lot of conversations on these themes and topics, unfortunately, are very either scientific, very jargon heavy, very much shaped by development work and workers. I squirm a little bit to say this in this room. But, as artists, as creative people, what are other languages that we are choosing to use to tell these stories, to ask these questions, to understand some of these histories? So that was our attempt. I can speak about the other exhibition if we have more time.
No, I think the point you raised about the stories that we choose to tell, I think that's a very important point, because that was so evident at the last Triennale here in Kathmandu. And for foreign guests, if you haven't come here, I would definitely invite you to 2026, because it is an event where we take art to the public, to the streets. And in the last edition, there was this conscious effort to highlight indigenous arts of Nepal, a conscious effort to decolonize the art. And I want to ask Sujan, who's the co-curator for the next edition in 2026, how do you see that edition then broadening this definition of arts and indigeneity in the Himalayas?
Thank you, Amish. I wasn't officially involved with this previous Triennale, so what I can say about that, the discourse it brought about was the need to look at our indigenous culture, our heritage and social knowledge, and also how it kind of like broke that kind of barrier where previously art events used to be very white cube centric, but also to bring about the local artisans and very folk art, even traditional art into the mainstream. So that really played a very major role about this creating this dialogue about like how we kind of have this Western-centric aesthetics or art practices that was very prevalent in Nepali society, even in Asia, or even like how British education system kind of like influenced India. Then we are partially like also our education system became derivatives of that. So this Nepali art was primarily looking at this Western as the highest form of art, but that Kathmandu Triennale really brought that kind of idea to break that kind of discourses, And going to the public, I wouldn't only acknowledge Kathmandu Triennale, but Photo Kathmandu already did that exercise quite a lot, and how it also kind of created that buzz within the town and also created ownership within the people was very beautiful. So regarding the next Triennale, we are trying to focus on this idea of coexistence and also the kinship and care, and we wanted to bring that coexistence because of the fact that there has been lots of disparity of the ideas, knowledges, and lots of conflict, So I think we need to look at how we can be more focused on harmonizing those kind of like existing dichotomies of knowledges. And I think with me and Natalie King, my artistic director, as a Kathmandu Triennale, we both are this co-artistic directors, So we are planning to bring in more other curators as invite them with this their own projects. So we are expecting around like 15 to 20 Nepali curators to come on board, and also and pairing them with international curators, So we really want to breeze that kind of like how we look into this knowledge system as a broader vision. And within this region also, we're trying to launch this Students Triennale and look at our, from the region, from Pakistan, India, Bhutan, Bangladesh, even Sri Lanka, and Maldives, like if we can bring in art students and have this kind of like dialogues, because youth are the people who will be solving the problems, because we have already created a lot, So we really think that they are the one who needs to be told about, or maybe inspire, as Naitara was saying, like how we can bring those stories to them, So we're trying to create that dialogue within our institute, like from Kathmandu University, even Tribhuvan University, and Seasonal College of Fine Arts. They'll be taking the lead and working with different art institutions from this Himalayan region. So at least to bring about this idea of climate change, even resilience, even kinship with lands, and how we can be inspired with lands, because most of our festivals or our events designed are replicating what they have done in the West. So we try to compare our Triennale with Venice Biennale. I think we need to focus Kathmandu Triennale for Nepal and for this region, and how we can bring more out of that, rather than being in the same level of other institutions or other events that happen in the West. So this is how we are trying to restructure the whole modality from before, and also trying to make it more for the people, for the community, and how we can get more out of it.
Thank you. I want to move to Nema. First of all, congratulations, Nema. Samoa won the Best South Asia Startup Award last year, so a big round of congratulations to her. It is the first Bhutanese OTT platform. And one of the things that I think anyone who's lived in the Himalaya will always know, that we have lots of stories, and we have lots of extraordinary stories that somehow never make it to what is called the mainstream. We make excellent films, we've got great stories, but somehow the bigger film and TV industries seem to always skip this part of the world. Nema, why do you think this is so? And do you think that Samoa can become a pan-Himalaya OTT platform and bring us these stories?
Thank you, Amish. I wanted to start off by actually asking a question to the audience here, because I want them to think about what I'm about to speak about. So I want to ask you all, how many of you all have tried Korean ramen or soju here? Okay, I can see almost a big majority who has tried Korean ramen and soju. And how did we know about Korean ramen and soju? And that's available around the world today. Primarily is through their films, their content, which has taken, the global stage. So I do feel that, especially in our part of the world, our governments and our policymakers do not recognize the power of film and media as a soft power tool. With using our films, we can do what I think a lot of governments can put a lot of resources into advertising, marketing, and brand building. A film can do that. And I say this because, at the opening here, Amish mentioned about a Bhutanese film, A Yak in the Classroom, which was nominated as a top 5 foreign film category in the Oscars in 2022. And that film brought a lot of attention to Bhutan, and it also brought a lot of tourism to Bhutan. So that's the power of a film. And just as I speak, another Bhutanese documentary film on a very important subject and an agenda that we've been discussing in the forum so far, climate change, a film called The Mountain Man has also been shortlisted for Oscars 2025 this year. A film made by Arun Bhattarai, a Bhutanese documentary filmmaker. So the film is about the only glaciologist in Bhutan who is measuring the glaciers year after year. So this is actually going to be one of the films on a very key agenda that's facing the Himalayan nations. They're going to put a spotlight on that. And to come to why Himalayan films don't really make it to the global mainstream market, I do believe it's because, number one, our films, the biggest challenge here is that we do not have enough Himalayan audiences actually supporting or watching our own films. And that's something that we need to really work on, and we need to start. And I think it can only start if we use Himalayan films not just as adults or as teenagers to consume content, but it starts right from our schools. When we grow up, we talk about history, we talk about culture, but how many of us learn about culture and our history and our tradition through films in our part of the world? We hardly do that. Whereas, in other Western part of the world, they learn a lot of things in schools through films, through the medium of art or from literature, or mostly through audiovisual content. And I think it's important for us to build our own big audience back at home who can rally behind us and support Himalayan content. And with the amount of traction that we gain in the Himalayan region itself, the audience that we gain here, then with that kind of traction, we can create globally compelling content. Because one thing we know very clearly is there is a big Himalayan diaspora all around the world. And just last time I was here, I was talking to Sujeev, and we kind of narrowed down the numbers to around 6 million of Himalayan diaspora living all around the world. That's a big diaspora, a big connect that we have to take our Himalayan stories globally. It's not necessary that an American has to appreciate our film for us to be successful. I think a Himalayan audience, an Himalayan citizen, needs to appreciate Himalayan stories and Himalayan films first. That's important. Just recently, Nepal has been in the spotlight for being nominated in some very big international film festivals. Just recently, I think Shambhala, right? Yes. Shambhala has made it to a very big international film festival. It's in the competition category. And we can have more films like this. They are very good Sikkimese filmmakers. And I was having a conversation with him here yesterday, and there is a woman filmmaker, who's making her first feature film in Sikkim, right? Full-length feature film in Sikkim, right? So it's like we need, firstly, to recognize that there is a huge amount of stories that we are sitting on. In fact, the kind of stories, the kind of history that this region has seen, we can actually create even fascinating versions of like the famous Game of Thrones, right? Or even like Harry Potter series from our own mythological epics that we have back in the Himalayan stories. So, and our folklore. The Norwegian film industry, they make a lot of content which is anchored on their folklore, and it's done really well around the world. So with global consumption for content really growing, there is, an appetite for foreign films. It doesn't matter whether you understand the language, whether you know the country or not, but most important is whether the stories appeal to you universally. Whether you're able to connect to those people at a one-to-one level. So I do believe that there is the future in the Himalayas for us to work together, to collaborate together as story creators, and also to build a platform, a truly Himalayan platform that brings the entire Himalayan films on a singular platform. So through which we can create compelling content, not just for the Himalayan audience, but for audiences around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Nema. When we were talking about Game of Thrones, I'm reminded of one, when Game of Thrones was a big hit, there were lots of memes going around on the Nepali social media comparing the Nepali Rana history, Shah history with the Game of Thrones and their characters. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot to be done over there. Coming on to stories, Raman, proudly independent bookseller, now a Himalayan publisher. Why? How did this transition happen? How is it going so far?
It's a long journey, but 22 years ago, when I started my career as a bookseller, it seemed like I was operating in a place where my place, Sikkim, was on the outer periphery of people's imagination and geographically as well. For example, if I would order for a list of books on Sikkim, I ended up getting a bundle of books on Sikhism. It happened. Gantok could be confused with Guwahati, Sikkim with Shillong. So it was on the very outside, it seemed. It seemed like a challenge. Fast forward 22 years later, a very big book on global warming by a very big author came out last year. And on the first page, the author goes to say that I grew up in Calcutta, and although Calcutta was so close to China, it was always on the outside of our imagination, again, because even though Bengal shared its borders with China. So these were the areas in which I seem to be finding myself operating time and time again. But given the unique location, geopolitically, historically, culturally, the kind of what we have in our space, it was attracting a lot of scholars. And thanks to the works like the likes of Professor Lama, the universities have been set up, and there were youngsters who were going into these universities looking for content, for books on our region. On one hand, here were these scholars coming from traveling across the world, trying to read, study our cultures, spending time with our people, and spending a long amount of time just doing a specific research on a very specific subject. These books and these research works would go to university presses abroad, or to a publisher in Delhi, or who, after a certain print run, you just wouldn't get these books. And if the book went to a university press abroad, the book would not only be inaccessible given the location, it would be unaffordable to a people on whom the research has been done.
Yeah.
So as a bookseller, I'm watching all this. The first stop that they have when they come to Gantok is my place, which makes me land up in most of the acknowledgement pages accidentally. But all this thing was happening, and I thought that, okay, there is a gap. Somebody has to do it. Nobody else is doing it. I think I have to do it. So I was almost pushed into this line of publishing. And 2 years a book, 8 years later, 8 books. It's been, this is one of the main reasons why.
And a major shortlisted prize as well.
Yeah, so that was another thing. So the thing is, like, let's consider publishing industry as a ecosystem. And a bookseller, as a bookseller, you're like the biodiversity, like the bio indicator. From our hands jumps the books into the hands of the reader. So the entire process of books being written, edited, design, cover, pricing, paper, this, that, all the works of the industry that happens, it's all building up to only one thing and one thing only: how the reader gets it. We as booksellers have the pulse on the readers, and our biggest battle in this ecosystem is not because we are losing readers, or there's an online shop that sells at phenomenally cheap prices. Our biggest battle sometimes feels is with the publishing industry itself. So I find myself in a position where I know what the readers are wanting and we know what is important. We have to read our stories ourselves. And that's what led me on into the world of publishing from a bookseller.
The online seller that shall not be named.
Can be named, no problem.
Nandara, I want to jump back to you and just think about what everyone is talking about, the stories, how we as Himalayan people ourselves, we have to first understand them. We have to first, content, consume that content, understand literature, read it at least, or at least take part in it, right? So how do you see these visual arts, especially in the areas that you work in, talking about the issues of, let's say, the fragility of the mountains, right? The fragility of the Himalaya. Do you think the visual arts today are communicating that adequately and in a sufficient manner, that it's that communication about how fragile the Himalaya is reaching the people that it intends to go to?
Right. Just to respond quickly to something Nima was raising, and I think comes up for everyone, including the Triennale and your bookshop, is this question of audience, no? Like, who are we speaking to? And that determining what stories we are telling, what language we are using, etc. Are we only speaking to the faraway Venice Biennales and the, global audiences, or are we speaking to each other as well? And so I think that's been something that we've been trying to think a lot about in our work. If we speak to each other here at home or in the region, how would we be telling our stories differently, I wanted to touch a little bit and share also and invite everybody who's here also to an exhibition that we have on at the moment at Nepal Art Council. It's called The Sovereign Forest. And it's work made by a New Delhi-based filmmaker, artist, Amar Kanwar. And in a nutshell, it's a pretty complex, layered work. So please come visit the show. But in a nutshell, it's the story about 20, 25 years of mining, large-scale industrial mining that has taken place in Odisha, on the eastern flanks of India, and the impacts of that. So of course it is, of course development is the large national, regional, global agenda, but at what cost and to whom? Is essentially at the heart of this exhibition. So along with the land and the forests and the rivers that we are losing, not even by the climate catastrophe, but through our development agendas, through our national agendas, along with that, what are we losing? So it really invites us to think about loss in a very sort of experiential way. So there is a film quite central in this exhibition called The Scene of Crime. Amar Kanwar is calling it a crime. And he's inviting us to the scene of crime. And he's taking us to the land in Orissa and showing us land, waters, forests that are actually now all gone. Because this work was actually made in 2010. So if one thinks about it, what we see in this film now, today, is actually all acquired land, waters, and forests and rivers that are gone. So it does that, and it paints this picture of loss, of what it is that we are losing as we develop. In very sort of simple but quite beautiful, eloquent, and also very sort of a little bit painful ways also. And it talks about how as this land is being lost, all the paddy fields that are no longer paddy fields. If there are no paddy fields, we're also losing rice production, no? And there's a seed room that he has installed in the innermost corner of the exhibition, where he shares with us 272 varieties of indigenous rice seeds that grow in Orissa. Now, in Orissa, it seems there are more than 3,000 varieties of rice that grow. But they're just looking at those 272 varieties of rice seed and thinking about what we are losing along with land is also knowledge systems. Farmers have owned for generations of how to grow on particular lands. When there's too much water, too little water, so on and so forth. We are also losing culture along the way, no? Because that rice is what we eat. It is closely tied to our culture. We do this very quick exercise with kids who visit the exhibitions, and we say, okay, in this group, how do we use rice to cook in our kitchens at home? They say sel roti, jaulo, chadamari, yomari, jad, so on and so forth. All of this food is actually so deeply, it actually defines our identity and our culture, no? Like who we are as a civilization. And so when we begin to connect these dots, I think another kind of meaning making begins to emerge. And I think that's what's possible through the arts and through culture, no? And through writing and through so many of the other mediums that we sort of actually have represented right here.
Susan, just moving on from that thought about looking to the future, and I mean, of course, there's been a massive loss in the mountains, we all know that, but when we look at the future, and you teach at Kathmandu University, how do you see, can we collaborate more in terms of education and pedagogy across the Himalayas? Can there be more collaborative efforts towards realizing what we are doing, what is happening in the Himalayas?
Yeah, I think education, as I said before, also the youth, if we do not address or at least inculcate these ideas into the youth's mind, then we would be failures. I think education is the best way to start that with. So within university system also, which definitely, as I said before, also kind of very much driven, influenced by the Western academia, still suffers that here a lot, where we kind of like glorify the Western ideas, the scientific thinking, even positivist idea, and kind of negate our own knowledge as superstition or cultural heritage or kind of naive. So I think that's where we have lost most of our knowledges, even with the stories, even with the words, even with the rice, as you're saying, like we have lost many of these kind of knowledges. So in the university, what we have been trying to fight against is how we can bring about those local knowledges, local systems or local beliefs. So that's where we have started this Bachelor of Craft and Design course. We have this Bachelor of Fine Arts course running where it kind of replicates the Western university's degree. Like our bachelor's degree is very similar like what American university teach. But our Bachelor of Craft and Design purely looks at the local heritage, local, our intergenerational skills and our economy, like circular economy, how we can be more adapted to climate change, how we can have this zero emission, zero carbon economy, like we are trying to look at those kind of aspects. So with that ideas, what our knowledge, or even our arts, our culture has always been intergenerational. That's where our knowledge system hasn't been documented well. So that's where we are struggling in terms of how we disseminate the knowledge. So our new course kind of like is designed in such a way that our students can work with artisans in their own space, even in their own workshop. So we will be giving them degrees, we will be awarding them credits with their prior learnings also. So we are trying to look at their prior learnings, but their prior knowledge that have they acquired from the families or even with the community, even with the lands. So that's where I think our pedagogies, even our content, our curriculum needs to be redesigned in such a way that it addresses the problems that we have here in this region. We had many answers to the existing problems. For instance, how we had this organic farming is now disinformed and reinformed by the whole new set of ideas. But we used to have this khet ko pet ko khet mein. So now it's like it has been reinvented with organic farming. It was taught, we had that culture before. Now it was diminished, it was neglected, it was kind of like, it was doomed to be very archaic. But now we are looking at the very knowledge as the lost kind of heritage. Yesterday I was in one program and one of this, Bhupal Rai, I guess he's the chancellor of Nepal Academy, he was telling that there used to be around like 48 Rai languages. Now only 5 are left. So with those languages that are lost, we have also lost our knowledges. We have lost our beliefs. I think that's where we need to reunite, and maybe we need to have this cross-cultural collaboration with other maybe youth or organizations in this region, at least to look at our own heritages or our own belief system. And that's where we can address many of the problems that we are facing right now, especially the climate change and sustainability. So that's where I believe that university system would definitely play a role. If it's not only offering a degree, it's not only offering the human resources for the West, for Australia, America, or Khadi, for instance. So we really need to look at our youth for the future, because we maybe 80% of this job market hasn't been invented for the 10 years down the line. No? We might need to be more progressive and more inclusive and let them understand that knowledge lies within ourselves and be inspired by our land.
Thank you. Raman, similar thing. Himalayan writing, we know it's seeing a resurgence of sorts, Nepali language publishing, lots of translations, Gorkhaland novels. How do you think writers are tackling these issues of our times, like climate change, not just climate change, but also urbanization, migration, development. Do you think our writing is tackling these challenges at all?
I can't really say for topics like climate change, but what we see is like there is certainly a very strong backdrop, which is now our own urban spaces. So, for example, a novel like The Light of His Clan by Chetan Raj Shrestha would never happen if it was not set in Gantok. And if Gantok was not of a certain nature, if it had not urbanized in a certain way, where everything is centralized to the point that the aspiration is that you have to be in Gantok if you want to move forward in life, that kind of a thing. And Gorkhaland movement has taken a long time for, this is like almost 2 years, 20 years delayed since the movement happened. Because I think one of the understanding is that the trauma of the movement has taken so long for the community to process. And the writers are only just beginning to explore that. But also there's the end of sort of a single party rule in the region was making things difficult for any sort of seemingly critique on the way things were happening. So even to a certain recent, when we have been talking about the Sikkim flood, Teesta flood, so when there was some reporting that was happening on, the reporters were beaten up because they were there to report on how the relief was being distributed. So a lot of that also comes with being in a small place and like just being targeted for writing what you are writing. But the big writings that have come out in recent times, Song of the Soil, Fruits of the Barren Tree, these are all written by writers who are not even born at the time of the movement. But having said that, there's a lot of churning happening, a lot of writings are coming out. There will be more, and things I think will only get better for the writings from the region.
I hope you'll be publishing them as well.
I hope I'll get some of them. And there's also issues like migration again, like which you had touched upon. Prajwal Parajuli's books, Gorkha Ki Chori, Chitra Lekha Ko Chaurasi. These books talk about migration. It talks about diaspora. It also talks about gender issues. In fact, Landwehr Rifle has been a part of master's, study program. Not only a part of the syllabus, but also it's being researched as a topic for the people, for students. Recently we published Mauli, which talks about, India and Nepal from the 1940s to 1960s, about a girl from Nepal, Tarai, who studies and is in an anglicized, in a convent college, comes back to her culture, but it's also against the backdrop of how Nepal was, end of Rana rule was happening, and Marxism was growing in the Siliguri region. There were no boundaries. So these stories are coming out in translations and in new writings as well. So there's lots to look forward to.
Nima, I want to come back to you to sort of give us a closure of sorts, especially from the tech perspective. I know yesterday you were talking about how without tech, we could not have accessed these stories to start with because OTT allows us to do that. But how do you think tech allows us to, let's say, give new momentum to Himalayan arts and culture in the 21st century? What can we think of over there?
Well, I think with the OTT and digital technology, access becomes much easier. So wherever you are in the world and on whichever device, you can then watch content. And I think the beauty of digital technology is that, you could have a Nepali film on the OTT platform, and you could have hundreds of language options that you can watch it in with dubbing on it. And at the same time, you could have hundreds of foreign language subtitles on it, and you could watch this from anywhere. So digital technology, I think, used with art and culture, art especially in our film, in the movie space, cinema space, it can really open the window and the door of opportunity to many, many different kinds of audiences. And, we have seen a big trend in global OTT platforms booming. And perhaps they have reached a peak as well when it comes to platforms like Netflix and Amazon. But at the same time, there is also a big gap. Like, For example, in India, you can see that while global platforms like Amazon and Netflix are doing amazingly well, there is also platforms that are focusing on niche audience markets, like specific language segments like Bengali or Bhojpuri, or Marathi, and they are doing exceptionally well. What does that say? It says that at the end of the day, whether it's global content platforms, people are looking for something that's more that they can connect to, they can relate to. That's why there is space for content, that's our own. And digital technology is a big enabler for that. I feel that in the Himalayan regions, we share so many cultures, similarities. We share a lot of values and sort of share a lot of traditions also, At the same time, there is so much of diversity. And then that diversity means that we have a lot of stories to tell that has never been told before. And in formats that the global world has now increasingly seen. So I just wanted to share that, likewise, even in Bhutan, we have been caught up by the Korean drama storm. A lot of, our young people watch Korean content, and a lot of I found out that a lot of older women in Bhutan also are big Korean star fans, And because of that, we have a big revolution of Korean cosmetic shops, happening everywhere in Bhutan, online as well as on the ground. So when we looked at content development strategy for SAMU in Bhutan, we understood that we had to also compete with global content. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we create content that just having local content is not enough. The content has to be relatable to people who want to watch it. They need to actually find something in it for them to watch. So when we created a strategy for young audiences, we looked at what they like. And definitely, it's like Korean drama is what they like. So we created Bhutan's first romance drama series called Chasing Stars. And that went on to become such a big hit in Bhutan. The OSTs became viral, to a point that I was sick of even listening to the OST in my car, because it was everywhere. It was everywhere, So what we realized is that globally successful genres, if we are able to create that in our own local languages with our own talents, it can also be successful in our own space as well. So the beauty of digital technology is it gives us access to data, which, traditional media, we're not able to get that. So we can tell what's working, what's not working, what kind of audience, likes what kind of content. And we can always get those data insights, firstly, before we go into the market from global platforms like Netflix, Amazon, how their content is being received. And secondly, after we start a platform, we have those analytics to see for ourselves. So, in Bhutan, we were told when we were creating content that horror is a genre that people do not like in Bhutan, or it doesn't work in theaters. So we did a little bit of experiment. What we did is we made a 15 minutes short horror film and released this on the OTT platform. And then the response was amazing. We had messages from people saying, can we have episode 2? It was not a series. It was just a short 15 minutes horror film. That gave us the confidence to make a horror feature film. And we released this horror feature film as a hybrid model. We released it in theaters because we wanted to test whether the theater audience would like this, and then also release it on the OTT platform. So the horror film became the biggest blockbuster of 2022 and went on to win 17 National Film Awards in Bhutan. So what does this tell us? That, when we use technology, use data, and then create content around people's likes and preferences, we can create a success story. And this is something that we feel that if we could do this in small scale in a market like Bhutan, we can definitely replicate this in a larger scale in the Himalayan region. And for us to be able to do that, what do we need? Firstly, we need to have forums that bring filmmakers in the entire Himalayan regions together to think as one, like how do we harness, the audience, the technology, and then, come together to create good content. And secondly, platforms, and then, of course, digital payment gateways, cross-boundary payment gateways would enable us to have this content consumed across our borders, seamlessly. And most importantly, I think, is also that we have policies. that support local content creation, and that we have policies that, for example, if you look at the Himalayan region, it's very difficult to raise film financing in any traditional manner. Banks don't finance films. They do not accept the film as collaterals. Whereas, in developing in countries like the Hollywood, with the West, or even, if you look at the success, the history of the film industry in Korea, we have seen that one of the biggest enablers was that they had access to film financing. At that, the creative content that they created was accepted as collaterals. And that was a big enabler, and we need that. We need that.
I think, it was Bong Joon-ho who said it at this, when he won the Best Director thing. Don't let the 1 inch of subtitle deter you from entering a new world. I think I'm paraphrasing him. But yeah, thank you. That was a great session. I think we have time for about 1 or 2 questions, very, very short questions. Questions, anyone? If not, then all right. Thank you so much, panelists. I hope we take all these lessons into heart. Like you said, who are we telling the stories for, and whose stories are we choosing to tell? I think that is what matters going on from here. Thank you so much.